theoretical foundations for the design of didactical material. What should ELT materials have? Expose the learners to language in authentic use, help learners to pay attention to features of authentic input, provide the learners with opportunities to use the target language to achieve communicative purposes, provide opportunities for outcome feedback, achieve impact in the sense that they arouse and sustain the learner's curiosity and attention, stimulate intellectual, aesthetic, and emotional involvement. Proposals for principal approach to the development of ELT materials. One of the things which materials writers need to do is to develop flexible frameworks to help them produce effective materials for target learners in principle and coherent ways. This is something it always do before embarking on a materials development project. The framework develops as I progress, and it helps to write quickly and effectively. But before such frameworks are developed, the writers need to decide what principles should drive their procedures. Here are the main principles of language which it follow when developing materials, and some of the principles for material development which that are derived from them. Principle of language acquisition 1. A prerequisite for language acquisition is that learners are exposed to a rich, meaningful, and comprehensible input of language in use. Principle of materials development 1. Make sure that the materials contain a lot of spoken and written text which provide extensive experience of language being used in order to achieve outcomes in a variety of text types and genres in relation to topics, themes, events, location, etc., likely to be meaningful to the target learners. 2. Make sure that the language are exposed to is authentic in the sense that it represents how the language is typically used. If the language is inauthentic because it has been written or reduced to simplify a particular language feature, the learners will not acquire the ability to use the language typically or effectively. Much has been written on the issue of authenticity, and some experts consider that it is useful to focus attention on a feature of a language by removing distracting difficulties and complexities from sample text. My position is that such contrived focus might be of some value as an additional aid to help the learner to focus on certain features, but that prior and subsequent exposure to those features in authentic use is essential. 3. Make sure that the language input is contextualized. Language use is determined and interpreted in relation to its context of use. The contextualized samples do not contain enough information about the user, the addresses, the relationships between the interactants, the setting, the intention or the outcomes for them to be of value to the language learner. It can, for example, think of at least 3 different interpretations of give him the keys, let him drive it, but you don't know what it really means, nor because the imperative has been used. Until what is known, who they are saying it to, what the relationship between them is, where they are, what has happened before, and what the objectives of the conversation are. Only extended samples of language in contextualized use can provide learners with the information they need to develop awareness of how the target language is actually used. 4. Make sure that the learners are exposed to sufficient samples of language in authentic use to provide natural recycling of language items and features which might be useful for the learners to acquire. Principle of language acquisition 2. In order for the learners to maximize their exposure to language in use, they need to be engaged both effectively and cognitively in the language experience. Principles of materials development. 1. Prioritize the potential for engagement by, for example, basing a unit on a threat or attacks which is likely to achieve affective and cognitive engagement rather than on a teaching point select from a syllabus. 2. Make use of activities which get the learners to think about what they are reading or listening to and to respond to it personally. 3. Make use of activities which get learners to think and feel before, during, and after using the target language for communication. Principle of language acquisition 3. Language learners who achieve positive affect much more likely to achieve communicative competence than those who do not. Principles of materials development. 1. Make sure the text and tags are as interesting, relevant, and enjoyable as possible so as to exert a positive influence on the learner's attitudes to the language and to the process of learning it. 2. Set achievable challenge which help to raise the learner's self-esteem when success is accomplished. 3. Stimulate emotive responses, the use of the music, song, literature, art, etc. through making use of controversial and provocative texts, through personalization, and through inviting learners to articulate their feelings about a text before asking them to analyze it. Principle of language acquisition 4. L2. Language learners can benefit from using those mental resources which they typically utilize when acquiring and using their L1. Principles of materials development. 1. Make use of activities which get learners to visualize and or use inner speech before, during, and after experiencing a written or spoken text. 2. Make use of activities which the learners to visualize and or use inner speech before, during, and after using language themselves. 3. Make use of activities which help the learners to reflect on their mental activity during a task and tend to try to make more use of mental strategies in a similar task. Principle of language acquisition 5. Language learners can benefit from noticing salient features of the input. Principle of material development. 1. Use an experiential approach in which the learners are first of all provided with an experience which engages them holistically. From this experience they learn implicitly without focusing consensus attention on any particular features of the experience. Later, they revisit and reflect on the experience and pay conscientious attention to features of it in order to achieve explicit learning. This enables the learners to apprehend before they comprehend and to intuit before they explore, and it means that when they focus narrowly on a specific feature of the text, they are able to develop their discoveries in relation to their awareness of the full context of use. 2. Rather than drawing the learner's attention to a particular feature of a text and then providing explicit information about its use, it is much more powerful to help the learners, preferably in collaboration, to make discoveries for themselves. Principles of language acquisition 6. Learners need opportunities to use language to try to achieve communicative purposes. Principle of material development. 1. Provide many opportunities for the learners to produce language in order to achieve intended outcomes. 2. Make sure that these output activities are designed so that the learners are using language rather than just practicing specified features of it. 3. Design output activities so that they help learners to develop their ability to communicate fluently, accurately, appropriately, and effectively. 4. Make sure that the output activities are fully contextualized in that the learners are responding to an authentic stimulus, e.g., a text, a need, a viewpoint, an event, that they have specific addresses, and that they have a clear intended outcome in mind. 5. Try to ensure that opportunities for feedback are boiled into output activities and are provided for the learners afterwards.